I've played tons of games, and throughout my life, I've played games that involve various topics: seafaring, traveling to far-off universes, digging up rocks underground, cultures that I thought I would never meet. There's a lot of stuff out there that we can experience in gaming, but the one video I was asked to make were videos based on the theme of war. I've noticed a shortcoming in the YouTube comment algorithm, at least in how I search for comments. So moving forward to avoid that, I'm going to take note of who physically requests a video and put it in my Trello. That's the program I use for keeping track of the videos I want to produce. So if you were the one who suggested games about war, then thank you. This video is for you. Again, in the future, I'll be writing down exactly who is requesting a game. For example, Universe Expanding Books and T2821 suggested top 10 LucasArts games. Obviously, I don't have enough source material to make that episode, but at least in the future, I'll know that I can attribute it to them. I want to make sure that the folks who provide me the idea get the proper credit. That being said, these are my top 10 games that I've played that involve war in some capacity. Let's begin. The Halo franchise has always been about being knee-deep in the bullshit on a galactic scale. When I first played Halo, I actually wasn't a fan of it. I felt that the multiplayer was the only thing I really liked, and it had some weird rock-paper-scissors style of combat when it came to what weapons worked against what enemies. And I don't know if there was ever going to be a part of the franchise that I would enjoy. Turns out it was just Halo 2 onwards. But out of all of the Halo games I've played, there was one that stood out to me significantly more than the others, and that was Halo Reach. The whole game involves Noble Team, a group of super soldiers known as Spartans, specifically one Spartan 2 commando and the rest of the group being Spartan 3s, but Noble Team was different. They were versatile, and most importantly, they were trusted. The story of Reach is very plot-heavy, and it's also incredibly emotional. Even to me, with my military experience, it gave me a variety of emotions that I felt when I served. It's a prequel to the first game, and I haven't played Halo 5, but I think this will always be my favorite Halo. I was having horrible luck with Warhammer 40k games. The franchise was in dire straits for a while, unless you really had a boner for board games that were put on the computer. Space Crusade was boring, Space Hulk was infuriating, Space Hulk Vengeance of the Blood Angels was infuriating in high definition, and then just when I was ready to assume that all games were shit until Dawn of War, Final Liberation Warhammer Epic 40k graced my eyeballs. Final Liberation follows a different playstyle and rule set than traditional 40k. Instead of single units, we have like Zanny bars of units, like 5 to a bar, I shit you not. Oh, and tanks. Lots of tanks. The storyline takes place on Volistad, and we're fighting back against Orc raiders, and we have to actively decide where we want to go on the map to continue our campaign. It is not linear in the slightest, and at any point the Orcs can retake their territory. In-game gameplay is dope too. There's some specifics that Epic has that threw me off, namely morale points. Think of it this way. If you have a group of gunners and they're in a foxhole together gunning down the enemies, you're good. But what if out of 10 people, only 2 remained? Mentally, there's a chance you might want to say, hey bud, fuck this, and skadoodle, which is exactly what happens in this game. There's a roll at the start of every unit's turn that dictates if they are willing to fight. It's very interesting, and it's very fun. There's a blend of CGI and FMV scenes, the acting is goofy, but I had a blast. Unfortunately, I was only able to play about 3 hours of this because the game has tremendous compatibility issues on modern computers, and it kind of broke my heart. I was having a blast with this. When I was a teenager, seeing a red box anywhere meant that there were DVDs inside, but as a kid, that red box could only mean one thing: the Neo Geo arcade cabinet. Now, I've mentioned it tons of times, but growing up, going to the arcade was a luxury. We were not wealthy, and it took me reaching adulthood to understand that my parents barely scraped by, and I decided to never put my family through that. While I don't like SNK and everything they stand for, out of all of the companies that kicked ass from SNK, Nazca Corporation was the one that stood out. Their artwork was phenomenal, and the Metal Slug franchise was something I spent way too much money on. Usually I only talk about one game, but I have played Metal Slug 1 through 3, and I hold them in the same standard. In an attempt to not inflate the list with 3 games in a franchise, I've included them all. I've never actually played Metal Slug 4, but to be fair, I haven't heard many good things about it. But if we go back to the original Metal Slug, we play as either Marco Rossi or Tarma Roving, who belong to the Peregrine Falcon Strike Force. Our whole job is just to take out the big bad evil guy. If you understand the plot, it's basically the same for all of them, just with different characters, enemies, vehicles, and locations. I think what appealed to me was that this game was a lot like Contra, but with controls and an appeal that a kid my age at the time would be drawn into. I'm actually playing this right now, and I'm having a damn good time doing it. Historically, real-time strategy games have not been my friend. I started with Warcraft and I hated it. Played StarCraft, loved it. Played Brood War, hated it again. To me, the best real-time strategy game I've played to date is Warhammer 40k Dawn of War, so don't be surprised if that one pops up here. When I played it, I saw everything in every comprehensible way had been improved. The units weren't stupid. The supply depots could bury underground. AI pathing wasn't the equivalent of running in a pitch-black corridor. The quality of life improvements were massive. Add in a badass storyline, great cutscenes, and a downtime between missions that keeps game flow moving forward, and you have the recipe for one of the best games I've played in a long time. Much like StarCraft 1, we can play as the Terrans, the Zerg, or the Protoss, but each race has their own different campaign. The plot picks up directly from the Brood War, but if you aren't familiar with that, there is an option to watch the story thus far, which will catch you up to speed with the lore. So far, this game has earned a spot on this list, and I do expect it to remain here for quite a while. Mass Effect has always been about war on a galactic scale, but not war in the sense of faction versus faction, but more so a coming together of factions to destroy a much larger threat to the universe. To me, the franchise has always hit every single checkbox that I wanted in a game that took place in outer space. I was able to meet different species, travel to other planets. I was able to make significant conversational choices, and those choices, and more so my choice to involve myself with supporting characters, was awesome. The only way it could have been more awesome is if it was an open world game, but it isn't. It's linear, and I appreciate that for what it is. Where Mass Effect 1 had us going up against Sovereign, Mass Effect 2 has us going up against the Collectors, and they don't fuck around, so we do have to care about what we do in game. To me, out of the original 3, Mass Effect 2 was my favorite, and it still continues to be so to this day. I know at some point there is a new Mass Effect coming out, and I do hope that it's just as good as the originals. I've always loved Star Wars. You ever have something you bonded with your father over? For some, it might have been watching football or NASCAR, or maybe the best memories you have with your dad is when you dropped a 6mm socket in the engine bay of his project car. We're all different, but for me, that common interest was 100% Star Wars. We saw all of the new movies when they came out, and even as an adult, when I went to Disney World with my kids, the only thing I wanted to do was get my dad a lightsaber. It was my sole mission, and I was beyond elated to be able to do that for him. Built it to his exact specs. He loved it. It was the last major gift I was able to give to him before he passed away. I treasure that moment. Star Wars Battlefront was a game I played thoroughly. The whole idea of physically being in the scenes that I grew up watching was so cool, and I adored every second of it. I loved changing between the various units and seeing what they were capable of doing, flying the aircraft if I wanted to, which by the way, I wasn't isolated to doing only that like I was in, say, Rogue Squadron, right? This is a solid must-have PS2 game, and I hold it in tremendously high regards. War as a video game topic is mostly fetishized. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. We expect high-octane action, tons of bullets flying, blood everywhere, hearing the roar of a tank engine, things that exist in games about war, and I feel in some ways we can blame Call of Duty for that. Now, I've been in the military. I was in the military for 11 years, and one thing I've noticed is that we all rag on each other, right? The Navy will call out the Army, The Army will call out the Air Force will call out the Marines, and together, with our powers combined, we collectively call out the Coast Guard. There's not a damn thing they can do about it. They don't even belong to the Department of Defense. But if you want to see what it's really like to be in war in a time where the world's future was kind of uncertain, then Valiant Hearts: The Great War is a game that you need to play. It's a tough game to get through, not because it's hard, but because it's what it was like having people die all around you. Friends you knew were gone. You made sacrifices to your body for others, and then when it was all said and done, you're forgotten about. Now, I'm not going to get into the story of Valiant Hearts because The Great War and the expansion Coming Home are beautiful puzzle adventure games that are plot heavy, and I would like for you to experience this on your own time. Trust me. Well, we talked about Battlefront, might as well talk about Battlefront II. To me, everything that Battlefront did right was amplified 100 times for Battlefront II. Pandemic did not hold back. They brought us a very important look into the lifespan of Vader's Fist, the 501st Legion. We could play them from their first deployments as clone troopers through their transition to the iconic stormtroopers that we all know and love. And more importantly, there was the Galactic Conquest mode, which offered some more replayability as well. But the big thing, and I do mean big, was the ability to have outer space fights. Previously to this game, any occurrence of vehicular combat on that scale involved it being the only part of the game that mattered. Think of Battle of Naboo, Starfighter, Rogue Squadron 3D, Star Wars Demolition, you know? So to be able to pilot a ship, land it in a capital ship, take out the core aspects of it, by hand mind you, and then get in your ship and take off as it explodes is epic to me. Absolutely epic. I've yet to play a game that I feel will ever remind me of how awesome it was experiencing this as a kid. Now, while many people shit on the newer Battlefronts, they really aren't that bad. It's just Star Wars Battlefield, right? It looks the same. Plays wonderfully too. Didn't expect to see this one on here, did you? Final Fantasy VI is a Japanese role-playing game, the best of the best if you ask me. To date, I've yet to play a JRPG or really any Final Fantasy game that was done in such a great manner than Final Fantasy VI. But is it a war game? Fuck yeah! We play as members of a rebellion going up against a horrible military dictatorship constantly involved in an arms race against them, watching them use chemical weapons in war. This is 100% a war-themed game, but it's not presented in the same way that literally every other game on this list is. The music in the game is perhaps my favorite as well, thanks to the mad lad Nobuo Uematsu. The character design is flawless, the artwork is impeccable, and the dialogue is neat. Kefka is a fucking sociopath, and there's not many times in JRPGs where I have a mental investment in the big bad evil guy. But for Final Fantasy VI, I did. I was genuinely concerned about what he could do to the world. And if you played the game, you know exactly what he did to the world. If ever there was a moment where you wanted to play an older JRPG or you just want to dip your toes into just one JRPG, this is a great starting point. Give this one a shake. Our final game on this list is the only RTS game to not make me have a coronary at least twice. I've tried Warcraft, hated it. Command & Conquer 1, hated it. StarCraft was solid, StarCraft 2 was amazing, but the one game that I always look up to as a golden standard of the genre in comparison to its competitors is Dawn of War. For anyone who knows about the lore of Warhammer 40k, you know that the lore alone is worth its weight in gold, and this game in particular talks about the Bloodraven Space Marines led by Gabriel Angelos, and their conquest against Chaos on the planet of Tartarus, all the while dealing with the orcs. The only complaint that I have is that the campaign itself was pretty short, but not so short that I was irritated by it. I could have just kept playing, right? It was that fun. The AI can be wonky sometimes, but that's just one of the things you expect from RTS games. The interface and the rest, wonderful. The music, god tier. I can't vouch for the expansions, and I certainly can't vouch for the later entries in this franchise, but this one, 100%. You should play this. The Game of the Year version is what I played, and it's affordable on Steam. And that's it for today's episode. What did you think of this list? What are your top 10 war games? Feel free to tell the community down in the comments section below. Speaking of our community, if you made it to the end of this episode, you're already home with our community. We're a gathering of like-minded individuals who love remembering a time when life was just a little bit easier to live, and if you align with that, then you'll fit right in. Finally, the single most important thing you could do for me is to hit that thumbs up button, as it directly impacts the visibility of the videos and the projects that I work on every single day. As always, from my family to your family, good energy, good vibes. Fortefyre out.